Good morning, everybody. Today, we would like to spend just a minute introducing Genware computer systems before we jump into our topic. Genware is, we like to think of it as the smallest global company. We were incorporated in New Jersey, however, back in around 1998, and have built a practice around delivering business intelligence and data warehousing solutions to our customers over the years, with a much stronger emphasis these days on the advanced analytics side of the things. We have branch offices and key architects located around the United States. We have a branch office in Florida, where Jerry happens to be sitting this morning. But we have my peers located in Florida, New Jersey, North Carolina, and so forth. We also have offices in South Africa and Montevideo, Uruguay, where we have teams of architects and designers building solutions there. And we have partners with various companies in these locations as well. Genware is associated with a company called the Data Shack, and we have a legal entity in both the Africa and the United Kingdom located in London. So we truly are a global company. The advanced analytics space that we find ourselves in is really quite broad when you think of all the technologies that are involved. And Genware has had an emphasis in all of these various components, whether you're looking at the back-end data integration, master data management, data virtualization, data catalog, and so forth, to bring the data together, or then whether you're now looking at the truly advanced analytics and applying machine learning and data science to that data to derive, the unknown unknowns out of the data sets that you're working with, and then delivering that knowledge through the visual analytics and enterprise reporting solutions, visual analytics in this case being Spotfire. We are seeing a lot of uptick these days in streaming analytics, the ability to actually look at your data in motion and have that information being delivered so you can literally see the needle bounce inside of the Spotfire environments and be able to monitor that data in the background for real-time alerts and so forth. Lastly, we're doing a lot of interesting things in the world of natural language generation, the ability to take the data that you have and construct meaningful dialogues and narratives for your customers or business analysts. So not only are you providing visual graphics, now you're also providing textual descriptions of the highlights of the data and so forth. Genware has a very strong partnership with TIBCO. We've been an elite partner of them for quite a while. This particular image that you're looking at was taken last year when we were awarded one of the Partners of the Year. We have 150 TIBCO customers and growing as of today. We work both independently but also with the PSG group at TIBCO. We are a certified training contractor as well and can deliver TIBCO training. Genware also has packages of training and so forth. In fact, the analysis that we're going to be looking at later today is part of our advanced analytics module. Down at the bottom, you can see that there's a lot of different TIBCO technologies that we have expertise with, I should say. And whether it's Spotfire doing visual analytics, the streaming, stream-based, and live data marts, or being able to bring together those virtual data marts using TIBCO data virtualization, we have skill sets in all of those things to help you deliver end-to-end solutions around your analytics. So with that, this will be the last slide. What we're going to do today is take a look at document properties. They provide a really high level of capability inside the Spotfire environment that if properly employed, can streamline the maintenance rather than having to go to 6 different charts to change an expression, have just one place to go to make them all respond correspondingly, and not just inside of a text box, but truly using the document properties to hold our various expressions and so forth. That's going to also help us do some filtering and those kinds of things. You will also take a look at a data function a little bit later that will allow us to populate document properties with values out of our data. This can be very useful for doing things like simply putting values into the headers of your charts that wasn't otherwise possible before. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at one of the more complicated commands that's available, the map command, which is a really interesting way of being able to create repeating custom expressions like if, then, else's, and case statements and so forth based on user selections, and have a dynamic expression respond to all of their various selections. So with that, I'm going to swap over to Spotfire quickly. And now you can see we have our dialog here, document properties and controls. We'll hit the button for begin. And I just want to spend a second just introducing the data that you're going to see. It's really quite simple. The top table here, this happens to be energy data, but it represents an entity of some sort and all of the attributes about that entity, including some aggregated statistics and measures and so forth. The bottom table we'll be looking at is simply the monthly production for the entities that we saw on the table above. So this, again, could be any kind of production. It just happens to be oil and gas. When we look at property controls, and just to review for a half a second, you know, a lot of you have probably already been using property controls to be able to change the coloring on a chart, or perhaps changing the size and so forth. These skills are fairly easy to learn and so forth. But when we go a little bit further over here, this particular chart not only has the ability to change and select a single value, it has the ability to allow me to select multiple values. So this particular property control has expressions. And if we were to do an edit on this and take a look at this control, we can see, in fact, that we have custom expressions that have been put in with nice, easy-to-read descriptions here on the side. So this is how we can have not only different collections of variables, but also potentially different aggregations as well. So remember that this is here because it's important on the next component. So now we have a dashboard page where I'm using these expressions, and I've got a multi-axis plot here, so I can see my various production measures in a scale that's suitable for them. When I go to the next page, however, it's the same data, but we're looking at it a little bit differently. Now we have a stacked bar chart, but we're adding up our oil, gas, and water to see a total volume. We're using those same metrics here as my columns, and indeed, we have the exact same selector that we saw on the page before. Now, as I start to look at my bar chart, I realize that I indeed have a problem in my calculation. My gas column is, in fact, in MCF, or millions of cubic feet, whereas my water and my liquid oil production is measured in barrels. So I need to make a calculation change, and that calculation change has to, in this case, I want to do it inside of my custom expressions here. So if I was to now go into this text area, edit my control, I can go ahead, and if we just use this first one as an example, go ahead and edit that. And I can come in here and say that has to be divided by 6, which is a standard industry divisor. All these things, then barrel of oil equivalent is what we need to calculate. And I can go ahead and I can say, okay, save that. And then once I pick values again, you can see now we've got a completely different look and feel in terms of actually calculating a value that makes some sense. Now, if I go back to my first page, we see that I have a selector. I'm going to pick liquid gas and oil again. If I come back to my second graph, we find ourselves back here again. Now, This is because this particular dropdown is sharing the same document property that's representing those values on this chart. So that the control inside of this area is now a different control than we see, let's say, here. And so if I need to now make this value equal to the EOE equivalent and do that division, I would have to go and make that change. But there's a better way. If I go in here, and this is one of the things that you kind of have to build it up as you go, because once you do it, the first time you have to do the maintenance, you still have to do it every day. But if I go to my control now, and I edit it, and I edit this line, I have gone already now using my document properties menu earlier. I have created a document property that contains the string that we see here. So instead of using the actual expression, you'd use the value that's in the document. Now we'll say OK. The net is really the same. And if we pick those values, we're going to get the same chart that we expected to see. If I go now to my second page, and I edit that, now in here, once again, I insert the value that we set up here. And if we need to make the change to the formula, we have it referenced. This one, reference back here. But now I can go to File, Document Properties, look at my statistics. Here is that same expression. I can now edit that. I do have the ability simply to make my change to that expression, divide it by 6, say OK, say OK. And in fact, now, as you saw, that changed. If we come back to my basic property controls and the other, in fact, we have now changed both charts, and we've changed the contents of both of these particular drop-down lists. So now, by using this document property concept, you have only one place to maintain your formulas. And if you find yourself repeating these formulas over and over, the first thing you do is create a document property that has them in it, and you, using the File, Document Properties menu, go ahead and create your list of properties that are meaningful, and then you can use them inside of the drop-down list. The next section over document properties is filter expressions. Really does exactly the same thing. It's just another sort of example of how you can effectively use this. One of the things that we often see when we go in to work with our customers who have been using Spotfire for a little while, but not necessarily are experts yet, is that they will have created multiple different filtering schemes inside of Spotfire to handle just a little bit of filtering on each chart that they want to have uniquely. They've done so rather than use what I think is a preferable method of using the limit by expression that you see on any chart. So right now you can see on our map here, we're currently limiting by expressions. I'll use my layer controls, take a look at this here. We can scroll down and see that in fact I have a string here that I'm using to filter. I want only wells that are newer than the year 2000 and only where their current status is active. If we look at our other charts here, you can see this is obviously not filtering to 2000, and nor is this. We can see all this history here. So what we want is these two charts to have the same set of limit by expressions. So I could very easily copy that text and go and create a document property, paste that text in. Now I have it in a document property. And you can see I've already done so, and I've got one called the Active 2000 filter. So in fact, I'm simply going to plug it in there now. Say OK. And now, with literally just a mouse click or two, have the ability in here to insert that expression. Like that here, properties. Now that I've done that, if I decided that I don't want it to be 2000 anymore and I want it to be 1995, all I need to do is file, document properties, find active 2000 filter, and that is, call that 1995. Okay. Now all of my charts. So this again is a really slick way of centralizing all of the names. If you think about it, you can get really clever, and even those filters can have another document property embedded in them that is maybe just the year that you want it to be your filter, and maybe you use that in multiple different expressions. So this whole concept really starts to build upon itself as you move forward. One of the things that we also want to do is be able to augment the headers of the chart with some information that's coming out of the data. Sometimes when we're building complex custom expressions, by the time we get our heads wrapped around all the overs and intersects and value, and the expressions can sometimes get really, really complicated. And there's often a situation where a value that we can calculate outside of the custom expression, a total value, how many wells do we have in our data set, how many are filtered to, those kinds of things. Just have a simple number that I can use to plug into a complex custom expression. Way that we get those values into the document properties is by using a data function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my data function properties here. I'm going to register a new one. Here I'm going to say import, and when we populate document properties, Spotfire data function, it's quite simple. Every variable that you want, you start to list here. So this is simply on the script is saying whatever I bring in as my input parameter, put it into the output parameter. So we're not going to go into the building of the data function today. That's usually the topic of another webinar. But if you work with data functions, you know that you add your input variables here as you register them, define what type of data they are. You do exactly the same thing for your output. The script then is very simple. It just says take whatever's put into the input variable, there should be the output variable. So I'm not going to define any more than that, but I'm just going to go ahead and run this one, show you what would happen. So now, as it's running, we need to tie this to our data set. So in this case, it's going to be an expression. I could do that against my summary table. It will work for me here. And I go on and edit. And perhaps I'm just going to do now that we have our values sitting inside of that variable, we can also determine whether we want it to be limited by filter or marking. Perhaps I'll say, yes, let's limit it by filtering. We will also say turn that on automatically. From an output standpoint, all we're going to do then is we want to put this into a document property. I'm going to create a new one, and I'll call it well. Say OK. Now that I have that, go ahead and say OK. That function will run. And now I have a document property, as we can see, called well count. That's counting our 144 unique wells. If I was to filter that number would reduce because we said we wanted it to. Now, what is that used for? Well, now that we have a value inside of a document property, I can put the header of this table, for example. And if we edit this, I can find my well count. Now I can put in, provide some information. So whether you're doing something simple like this, or if this value is perhaps useful in a complex custom expression that would otherwise require you to do a bunch of additional overs and thens and so forth. Simple calculations that can be based on marking and filtering can be plugged into this custom expression in the way that I show. The last thing I want to talk about today is something called the math. The math function is quite interesting in that it allows us to create a loop across multiple selections made by our user. So here, this seems to be a pretty typical drop-down list where I can pick. So if you know anything about Spotfire, you realize that this box is now dynamically picking up a whole different set of values. This is not a filter. This is simply a text box that's been designed to pick up the unique values in any given column. This is a typical drop-down list, but simply setting a document property to be what column am I interested in. Then I've done a simple little exercise here where we use something called selected column. It's just a calculated value. So basically, it's whatever thing we choose here, make it equal that column's values. So this would then be the list. So whatever column, if I say operator, it's simply to move the value from the column operator over into our chosen column, selected column. Now that I have that, then what I need to be able to do is filter this particular report based on those values. So I need to be able to select and see that filtering action happen. If I change, I can again have a single dialog on my page to be able to filter to something else. So how does that work exactly? If we look at the syntax of a map function, it expects what this case is a multi-select list box. And so when you select them, you basically end up with a string list of all the values that you selected. The map then says, create a template. So the template is, what is my value look like? And then you map into that the value of the property, and it creates a loop. So in this case, we're doing a filter loop, and you can see if I was to select something similar to this text here in the box is saying, if the selected column value equals this string, or it equals that string, or that string, and that string would change dynamically depending on what you actually chose here. So let's go take a look at that. I go to right-click and take a look at the properties. We go to the data. Down here to our limit expression, we see that the syntax here says map, and then it's everything inside the quotes here is what we want to see be repeated. And then at the end, it's an optional argument that says for every time we repeat, what do we put in here? So this could be anything from at the end of a case when statement. In this case, we're just nesting a bunch of ors together. Down here, we can see what the actual statement that is generated actually is. And I'm just going to copy that here and just paste it in so we can take a look. And here you can see that dynamically, based on the selections here, we've created an OR statement that allows us to take a look at all those things. So the idea is that by using the multi-selects, you have a list. That list can be used to build up any kind of repeating data function. We at Genware have used these, again, inside of case statements, inside of nested hierarchies on a chart, all various ways of doing selections like this, using only a single object on the screen to be a filter for multiple different columns, which is what this one's doing. But the app is a really, really powerful tool that will allow you to create looping statements that you really haven't been able to do before. Feel free to reach out to your various contacts at Genware. We have a wealth of experience in these kinds of techniques and so forth, and be very happy to show any of them to you. Well, with that, we're going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. Again, feel free to reach out to any of the people listed on the screen. We'd be happy to help you with the Spotfire Document Properties. Look forward to presenting to you again on another webinar topic in the future. We do them about once a month, so keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sending you an invitation. Thank you.